are taking a few moments today to share with your MMAE's colleagues and peers your experience using CARS as a tool, as a creative resource for figuring out who's in charge, who does what. It doesn't always have to be you. I have some questions for you to start with. Just a while back, about 8-10 months ago at this point, you came to me, and in some of our organic conversations, you said something needs to change and we could use some help. And we started this journey on this large infrastructure transformation process. Curious to understand, before we jump into CARS specifically, why, where you saw that need and why we started this and why you took the initiative to put this in place in the first place. And Christy, I'm curious to hear from you first.
Sure. Thanks, Erica. I think the first thing was that we had some pretty steep growth goals. And when I started to look at all of the things that we were doing, a lot of the responsibility I felt fell on my shoulders. As a leader, I felt responsible, but I also felt accountable for everything. So I found that I was doing a lot, and looking at Elena, and we found that Elena was doing a lot, and really trying to figure out, how do you start to make other people on the team accountable? And it became very clear when we started looking at our current structure that who does what and how do you put those people in the right places. And we kind of fumbled through a few reiterations, and it just never felt right. And I think there came a point where we looked at each other and we knew it was beyond us, to look at, how do you really start to break apart? What do we do? How do we do it? With the idea of, this is the big goal in mind, and how do we get to that big goal? And it was beyond the two of us to figure that out, and understanding how we break that apart, so that, again, the roles and responsibilities really felt like it was just her and I, and we weren't giving more accountability to the rest of the team.
Elena, how about from your perspective, operationally, when you and Christy jointly came and said something needs to change, and how do we do this differently? From your perspective, why was this important and necessary and led to the conversation?
Well, I think to add to Christy's comments, we grew substantially over the last couple of years. So thinking about the VB department, 5 years ago, we may have had 6-7 individuals. We are now at 24, 25 individuals. So the way that we were operating previously essentially just was not working. And we knew that we had talent within our team and we wanted to utilize that talent, but everything was kind of bottlenecking and flowing through Christy and I, that we weren't utilizing our team to the capacity that we should have. And so we had to have kind of a heart-to-heart to say, look, the way that we're operating today it's not working anymore. It may have worked back then, but it doesn't work now. And so figuring out, starting the program with you, Erica, and your team, and kind of moving into that CARS exercise, that pretty much was the crux of our the entire process and the entire project. And so that really helped us realize that, okay, it doesn't have to be Christy and myself. It can go to other individuals within our team. So, that was the initial intent of, and kind of flow of how we got to where we're at today.
And to Erica, I'll add one more thing. The other thing we heard from our team was that they didn't feel that they had a path for growth. And that was a huge component to this too, to say, okay, what can we do? How can we build this so that people do see that there is a path for growth here?
Thank you. And you're hitting upon something really important, which is when you did come in the beginning, the initial conversations were, here's what we've already tried, and this is where where we are now. We asked some new questions. Well, where do you want to be? And what do you need to do, and who needs to be in charge of what and why and how to get there, and then tie that to the bigger vision so that they could grow, you could grow, VB could go all in alignment with MMAEs. So I'm going to start with Elena first. What were some of the surprises you experienced as you worked through this transformation process and began mapping things out using the CARS model?
How much work Christy and I were doing. We essentially, when we reviewed everything and kind of laid it all out, as far as, because the process is to first identify everything that you're doing and who's doing it today. And then really ultimately moving forward, looking at your growth goals, what that looks like. And ultimately, Christy and I, we were doing roughly close to about 80% of the work, the upfront work. Now the support and the service, was amongst our client relations team, but all of that upfront work, the sales and all of that, I mean, it was substantial. And the surprise was that, and the fact that once we identified other individuals within our practice to kind of handle all, certain tasks, I don't know for Christy, but for me, it really freed up a lot of time on my calendar for me to start working on process improvements, which I've been wanting to do for years. And they've just kind of taken a backseat because you're working on everything else. That was my main surprise. The other surprise was how our team stepped up. So when we started to give these tasks where, we were doing it and thinking, oh, we need to do this, and then handing it off to individuals who, took it, ran with it, owned it, being accountable for themselves, it was like a breath of fresh air. And it was an amazing transformation that, I think everybody should do within their practices.
I agree, 100%.
Christy, how about for you? Additional surprises for you?
Yeah, a couple of big things. One, the efficiencies, the cost efficiencies. I think that was a big thing for me because there was a lot of overlap. And as I started to look at this, Elena and I and some of our leaders were on multiple phone calls together and handling it together. And that costs money when you have all of us doing the same tasks or supporting each other in those tasks. And nobody was really truly owning some of those places. So I think there was a lot of ways for cost efficiencies, as well as looking at if we use like India, for example, where could we use India, where's a lower cost to doing business than hiring somebody at a high cost. So we were able to identify areas that really could help us cut costs from the bottom line. And I think that was a big surprise for me. The other thing that was a huge surprise, and I probably should have realized it sooner because I was here 2 years before I really figured this out when we went through this process, is that we were a service organization, but yet we were talking about growth, and we want to be here, we want to grow. But we weren't set up for growth. We were set up to be a service organization. And so now when we restructured, we really looked at, well, how do we design our team for growth and to still support our clients, but really from a sales and service perspective, and really splitting that apart and having that new infrastructure to support our future goals.
What were some of the ways that using CARS, figuring out the who does what, communicating self-accountability within the team where people are stepping in and taking the lead, how has this shifted the approach in your capacity to lead?
It's night and day. Do I have time back? Yes, 100%. I think it shifted the way I look at things. So it used to be, I'll do it. I even catch myself, even last week, Elena and I kind of giggled because I went, oh no, I shouldn't be doing that. That's not my role any longer. And so when something happens, we'll say, okay, who now owns that? And while I might be, as the leader, the practice leader, responsible for the overall, the team, right? And our results, but am I the one that has to be accountable for each one of these tasks? And as I started to see who was taking on each one of those things, like Elena said, we saw people step up. And now I have this ability to step back and let people do their job versus me stepping over and looking over and guiding. And yes, if they need it and they need the mentorship and they need the coaching, we're there, but allowing people to get out and succeed or fail. And it's okay. I'm okay when people fail because they've learned from their experiences, but we weren't letting them do that before. So being able to step back and take that leadership role in a different capacity, it empowers people. So I've seen my people feel empowered. And I feel like I can breathe a little bit and I can start focusing on the things that I should have been focusing on as a practice leader. And that is growth and sales strategy and those types of things, which I was not doing. And I didn't have time for that stuff before.
How about for you, Elaine? Anything you wanted to add to what you've already shared about how this shift in approach, the shift in thinking has impacted your ability and capacity to lead?
Well, it really does, in the sense that now in this, where we're at with this project, we went through the whole cars to determine the responsibilities, the accountability, who's communicating what, who's supporting each other in certain tasks. Now it's really the nitty gritty of the process improvement project, which we labeled it PIP. And basically it's now meeting with the individual team members, as well as, some that oversee lines of business, to say, hey, okay, we did this transformation, we've created the, created the tasks and who owns what, but there are some processes that we need to look at to determine, that they need to be improved upon. And so if we didn't go through this CARS exercise, I would not have been able to devote the time that I'm devoting today to meet with everybody weekly, making sure we hit our target goals, making sure that we, include stakeholders who are responsible, because not only am I working with an individual team on one thing, but that the project could touch various other team members that we need to bring in. So it is a huge project. I would have never been able to do what I'm doing today if we didn't do the CARS exercise.
Yeah, I mean, it gave us a clear roadmap, Erica. And I mean, even today when we talk, we follow that roadmap. It's a very clear, concise roadmap. Accountability, roles and responsibilities. I think everybody feels they have a clear picture of their role.
Has that had an impact on misunderstandings, people issues, messiness, that kind of, yeah, you haven't, and how it has in a positive way?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Elena, yeah.
And I mean, even with Christy and myself, there was always kind of trying to figure out, well, are you managing that? Am I managing that? Now we have a clear view of who is doing what, and essentially takes the confusion out of things. And we're able to focus on our job and what we need to do.
And would it be fair to say that less is getting dropped or missed?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Or if it is missed or dropped, it's picked up, it's caught sooner. Is there?
It's more around the fact that both of us are not doing the same thing.
Oh.
So not necessarily would we drop something, we would essentially both do the same thing and say, well, I did that. Well, I did that. And it's like, all right, well, now we don't have that, which is great. So,
and that would even happen with the teams, right? Yes. I mean, that was even happening, like we would have an RFP going on and you would find that people were doing the same thing over and over again, or they were recreating something, or it just created this efficiency. Like I said, there's so many efficiencies that were created by this. So while it has saved us time, I believe wholeheartedly that our team has also saved a ton of time, because we're not recreating the wheel every time we're doing something. Somebody owns it, right? Somebody's managing those processes. It's very clear who does what. So I do think that while we did a lot of that, it wasn't just us. It was all across the board, and it's definitely improved for everybody.
What advice or guidance would you have for your peers in terms of utilizing CARS to clarify roles?
Yeah. Throw everything you thought in the trash and start over. No, I'm just no, I do think you have to go into this with an open mind, because what you think, the way you think it will end is probably not the way it will end. And it's because once you start, I hate using the term peeling back the onion, but once you start peeling back the onion and you start getting into, okay, why does this position exist? Or why does this role exist? Does it help us get to our goal? And how does it help us get to our goal? Once you start asking that question, you look at that role or that job duty very differently than you might have looked at it before. And you may say, do we even need that any longer? Does that really help us get there? So I would say you have to go into it with an open mind, be willing to hear other people. It's not just about, and Not that this is, it's speaking from myself. It's not just about the way you think, right? Your vision may not be everybody else's vision. So you have to go into it being open-minded, willing to talk, willing to listen.
And you said something important. It wasn't that does this person need to be here? It was, does this role need to exist? And one of the steps that we haven't talked about, which doesn't fall quite into the scope of just the cars itself, was that we did take away the specific people who are already there first and look at this more objectively in terms of, for this task, for this project, for this process, what's the role that needs to be responsible, and then figured out where the people's strengths and skills align. And there was some chess playing that went on from there, but everyone ended up better aligned or differently aligned or consistently aligned with where they needed to be with cars. And that, I mean, there's some where there are people with questions about that. That's a whole, we could talk about that just alone for another 2 days. So, Elena, I want to come back to you with the same question. What advice would you have for your peers, if nothing else, if they're looking at cars as a role clarifying tool that could benefit them?
I mean, really, I would just reiterate what, Christy mentioned, that to really just be open-minded. It was an eye-opener because there were, in looking at our structure, we were very linear before. We had analysts and we had client service managers, and that was it. And it really was eye-opening in the fact that, in the way that we looked at all the tasks, the hundreds and hundreds of tasks that we do within to make sure that our practice is running successfully, it created roles essentially, and figuring out then who kind of fits into those roles. So it really, you have to take the time and really kind of pull apart everything that you do on a daily basis. It is a little bit of work, I'm not going to lie, but it is so impactful in the way that the results that come out of that. It's so worth it.
I want to thank both of you for being part of this. It's been pretty fun and surprising on my end as well, because I never know how things are going to turn out any more than you did as we go along. So thank you for that. And I look forward to our continued conversations around all of it.
Yeah, thank you for all you do, Erica. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.